Hallo und willkommen zu nur wirklich letzten Folge von Trace into Reverie. Wir sind noch mitten im Lesen von Moonless, Morn, zweite Folge, zweiten Part dazu. Wir werden das in dieser Folge finishen und ab morgen, Morning Callen, werden wir in Daybreak reinstarten. Beziehungsweise zu dem Zeitpunkt, wo ich das aufnehme, ist es auch für mich morgen. Beziehungsweise zu dem Zeitpunkt, wo dieses Video rauskommen wird, werde ich wahrscheinlich schon am Stream von Daybreak sein. In Trade Through Daybreak. Also ja, ich habe so Bock drauf. Aber first things first, Moonless, Morn müssen wir noch fertig lesen. Und wir sind stehen geblieben bei Chapter 10, wenn ich es richtig im Kopf habe. Genau. Chapter 10, Makigali. Raichu's habitat was the perfect place for this beast that topped the food chain to call home. It sat at a mountain's highest point like a king would his throne, the black, stormy clouds whirling overhead in a natural royal ground through thunderous applause did it create its weapon, and its subjects below, its prey, never failed to succumb to it once stricken. There was just one thing the beast did not realize about this place, that its terrain, impregnable on the surface, was also the perfect environment to set a trap. There were two paths to reach the summit. One was at the end of a long, spiraling trail that looped around its peak. The other was a straight, steep path surrounded on both sides by high rock walls. The first of the hunters who came to claim Raichu's life appeared from the spiraled road, shouting at the top of his lungs a call unique to the woodland wanderers. "You sleeping, Mr. Bear?" Thou shouted, "'cause I'm ready to wrestle." Thou leaped from rock to rock, his unique hunting call being shouted between taunts and insults. In a bag slung over his back, there were a number of single-shot rifles from the cabin, ancient even by the Matagi standards that were relics of a fallen kingdom. His cries were used in the past to intimidate meek rabbits and fleet-footed foxes into submission, but Raichu was no small prey and showed no hint of fear upon hearing them. This, however, was well within the realm of expectations. Drawing one of the smaller rifles from the bag, he made a blistering show out of firing a nearby rock. Raichu paused for only a moment before roaring in turn, fur bristling from head to toe from this mortal threat. Perhaps it still possessed memories of being hunted by the Matagi as a normal bear, but whatever the reason, the sound of the shot was enough of it to understand its position from hunter to hunted. There's a tough guy now, you big furball. Thou continued, leaping from rock to rock while dodging Raichu's impulsive lightning strikes. After throwing his bent rifle so that it stood upright in the ground, he pulled a second one and fired without hesitation. This one hit its mark precisely, causing the King of Thunder to howl upon being struck. The bullet was too weak and Dao too far for it to pierce through the beast's thick hide, but this, too, was expected. Raichu sent out a flash of lightning as an instinctive counter to the pain delivered, but it was strange. Rather than deliver the devastating shock it was meant to, it passed through him harmlessly instead. It really worked. Dao grinned with pleasant surprise. He was touching the upright rifle he discarded after use, allowing the lightning fire to pass through it and into the ground. He was positively giddy with the discovery. "Oh, you're a genius, are you? And I would have thought to use these as lightning rods." As long as he positioned the spent rifles like so, he could creep closer to Raichu and never have to worry about more elemental properties of its offensive. "I've got so many of these as I've got shots. No time to show what woodland wanderers can really do." Thou betted he had another hunting call, and with every shot fired and rod blazed, the weight on his back was lighter, allowing him to move at an ever faster pace. He moved in a circular motion, confusing the bear as he led it successfully toward the other part to the summit sandwiched on both sides with rock walls. "Guess no matter how strong it is, it's still got the brains of a beast," he muttered to himself before calling out to his companion. "I said it your way, saw you? Ready down, bring it in." But still gathering its electricity for yet another counterattack, Raichu was guided into the straight and narrow path. It was met with a sudden barrier of mist that bathed the beast in its own sparks. "Got it!" Dao shouted. The barrier Raichu stumbled into was not a physical one, but rather a cage of energy strung between countless arrows stabbed into both sides of the rock's wall. Moisture from the air glistened off the arrow's exposed tips. I've never done this many at once, I began, but it doesn't mean I can't do it. The barrier formed from the fusion of Zio's energy with the cylinder of the frozen sky's power was, in essence, one of pure fog. The more Raichu tried to force its way through this barrier, the wetter it became, causing its natural electricity to short out. Any attempt to step into it caused a wealth of pain. The way out is just as bad, Zio confirmed, shooting additional arrows behind it and filling them with more power, expanding the cage that much farther. Now, even if it were to turn around to run out of the corridor, it could no longer do so without sustaining considerable damage to its own thunder. Phew, that's gotta pin down. Think the rest of the plan's gonna go this smooth? This won't stop it for long, Zai responded, but it should hold it long enough for June to give us the signal. Raichu could not escape before passing through the cage of fog, but decided to transform through possession of an ancient artifact. It was still a wild beast at heart. It had no concept of surrender, only survival, and would persist even if its only route to tomorrow would do it harm. Roaring wildly, the beast threw itself into the cage wall, blooming a constant fountain of sparks from its massive body. The idea is craziest thing's gonna cook itself alive. I haven't seen Jun and Signa, I reported. I don't know if I can hold it much longer. The cylinder of the frozen sky slotted into a crossbow circuit between, losing its brilliance and pulsing with flashes of blue light. Each time electricity surged through Raichu's body, it flickered brightly in response, almost too brightly, as though the cage and the beast's resistance were pushing it beyond its capabilities. So he knew that putting any more power into this would risk the danger of an explosion that would leave her far worse off than the target. Realizing this as well, Dai refused to stand around and do nothing. Dao had one other source of protection, a leather cloth from the cabin he covered in glass powder and resin painted on his body, wrapping himself from the head down with this repurposed insulating cloak, and protecting himself with gloves made from the same material. Dao bounded through the cage of fog and closed in on Raichu. Flashes of light scorched the road, but he pushed forward until he was directly before the object of their hunt. Dao, are you crazy? Nothing crazy about standing in a cage made by you. Alright, Raichu, you're in for a real shock, cause it's about to get unbearable for you. He then threw himself into the body of the beast, lashing out with his protected fists. Though the attacks he landed were of no real threat, the insulated strikes triggered waves of electricity that surged through it with each devastating punch. This works for me better than any gun, worth the dive, Dao cracked before taking a stance and drawing in a long breath. Finding his feet before the flinching king of thunder, Dao focused on every muscle in his body and, while filling his lungs with the clean mountain air, became one with the environment's natural flow of life energy. Only when it reached its peak did he spring forward. Shin! Dao kicked off the ground, air trembling around him till Zio could swear she saw snowflakes dancing from his body as he sent an incredible punch into Raichu's chest. This alone was enough to send tremors through his whole form. The secret graph Shin could mean many things: heart, core, quake, deity, and was among the ultimate techniques in the martial arts style created by the Woodland Wanderers. It required synchronizing every part of the body, bone and muscle and all, and compressing one's strength until one forced this dense power forward like a coil in a trap. Certainly this kind of precise, powerful technique spoke to the wisdom gained through generations of journeying and surviving the wild. Can't believe it, Dao, you mastered Shin. Sayu followed up Dao's attack by sending a shower of bolts from the top of the rock wall down upon Raichu, preventing the staggering beast from steadying itself. Dao took the chance to send another blow to its throat. As it fell back, it no longer saw the cage's walls as a concern, pivoting to escape its hunter through the fog and singed fur. I thought I would kill it, but it looks like we put it on the ropes. Sayu cheered into the corridor to Dao. Are you alright? I'd love to tell you I am, but my gloves are done for, Dao responded, raising up his arm to display his gloves as he did so. I can't keep this up much longer. Okay, I've just got to keep it busy, so I'll take O on the offensive. There was a hint of hesitation in her voice as she agreed to this. She was already pushing the cylinder of the frozen sky to its limits. Dao's craft was also one of the great strength, and she doubted her crossbow would have nearly the same stopping power as it. A second later, into this train of thought, did the sign they were waiting for make itself known. A deep bass sound echoed off the mountain, carrying far and strong despite its low pitch. It was proof that the two of them had fulfilled their role in the tactic. "That's a concha, Junan. Junan's ready," Sayu exclaimed. "You sure kept us waiting long enough, but now it's got me all fired up for round 2. Now come on, Sayu, let's take him down for good." "Right." As Sayu descended, she released a section of the cage between Raiju and the summit. Doing this would help Sayu to amplify the impact of her attacks as she concentrated much needed moisture into each bolt fired. She then reunited with Dao, and with their backs against the still existing cage wall, blocking the other path downward, she unleashed a final goading strike at the beast's back. Sayu and Dao followed behind it as it ran. Reverie coming ahead would be able to exact the next stage of their plan. Driving Raiju back up toward the highest point of the summit, the King Throne would soon become its tombstone. Ich will jetzt schon was trinken, ja. Chapter 11. To mark the hour. He knew they would guide Raiju to him, though it defied logic. Juran had such faith in his new companions that even as he waited and waited, he had the hand on his muzzle load and never trembled with anxiety. He remained calm even as the moment that would decide his fate approached. Grew on his conch shell and pictured the daring, triumphant smiles in his mind's eye. Signaling with such a loud sound gave his position away and was tantamount to suicide under any other circumstances, but he wanted to drown out even the roars of the very beasts they hunted. He wanted to be found. He was confident. He no longer feared. It was all thanks to them. The conch shell summoned hope to him as he heard the calls of his companions following the booming footfalls of his sworn enemy. Sayu and Dao were acting as decoys, like a trap, with the intent of driving the King of Thunder into Junlan's range. At the top of the spiral path Dao had used to ascend, the wooden wanderers set a perfect trap, a modified bear trap, to shower it with water and shards of metal. There was no better method to continue throwing Raichu's natural abilities into chaos and stopping it in its tracks. And if the beast were to leap from summits, cliffs into the spiral path below to retreat, it would be welcomed by more traps and weapons set by Junlan. It's finally time, though I never thought it would happen like this, thought Junlan. He was hit with a mixture of emotions pouring out of him, so many that he could not concern himself with labeling them all, or most of them. Of those, one unexpected emotion manifested more clearly than the rest. I don't feel any hatred toward Raiju. Never once since the time he lost his father to the beast did he ever feel hatred for it. Not really. Not in the way he thought he did. He felt loss and grief upon losing the last of his living relatives, but in his heart of hearts, he saw his father as a true Mataki who fell after fighting for his life on equal terms with the mountain. His father had bet his flesh, his blood, struggling among its blessed nature, but his blade was simply unable to surpass the survival instincts of his own opponent. How could Junlan turn such a natural, beautiful thing into a grudge? How could he let the fear of his father's death consume him to a point that he forgot not all was truly lost? What motivated Junlan in this moment was a desire to complete what had been started by someone he loved. That was all. This isn't vengeance for you, he thought of his father. I still don't fully understand everything you said back then, but I'm here, alive, facing a life, and I keep facing it with all that I am. To Junlan, this mild understanding was enough to leave him content. His companions from a foreign land retorted in him a sort of hope that his years past were not in vain, but were a guidepost that brought him to this very moment. To the moment when his days of simply breathing, eating, and sleeping from sunrise to sunset would end. To the moment where he realized he was still alive. Here they come. Junlan heard an explosion of thunder from the rock he hid behind on a spiral path. Above him at the highest point of the summit, Sayu and Dao's voices shouted in response to the conch shell as they continued chasing down their hunt. But a few heartbeats passed before Junlan could sense Raiju's presence directly above him. He then put all his weight into giving a rope in his hand, with one hand, a single sharp tug. Leaning as he did so, on the end of the cliff above him began to grumble. A single boulder that rested on the corner of the sheer peak had been yanked free of its position, and with support wholly lost, the throne of the king trembled honestly before collapsing under the beast's weight. It was a good thing he had seen Zion's power as he buried the Oni in the snow. Zion Dao had not blocked the mountain path just to give Chulan time to set a few traps, but more so he could turn the entire area into one massive similar trap to what he witnessed before. To any observer, he may have made pulling a rope to trigger the collapse of a cliff look simple. What he did, however, was delicately balance the boulder on a rod before and to leverage the rock in the right direction he desired. It was almost a miracle he could get it ready in the short time Zion Dao had to stall their target. Raichu! Finally chased to the dead end, Raichu stood down the summit among a shower of falling rock fragments and snow. It was only around 15 acres up, not enough of a fall to kill it, but Chulan had prepared its landing point with caltrops and other traps to pin it down. Every fiber of his being cried for him to end them, yet regrettably, reality often makes a mockery of even the best laid plans. Raichu was thrown off its trajectory by an uneven phase of the cliffside, well away from the trap set, landing instead right before Junlan. But that's how it's going to go, he muttered aloud. Fine, that won't stop me. It was almost better than his original plan even. Knowing he could end the beast's life personally rather than through a trap gave him a sense of fulfillment, as though something had guided him to this fitting end. The false rain is over, Raichu. Matagi never misses his targets, he tries. A fire erupted from within him. With him out the wide ground, watching once more, nothing stopped him and the beast from continuing the fight that started 5 fateful years prior. Chulan had his back pressed against some boulders that had fallen along the mountain path while his opponent was backed by the sheet face of the summit. Let's finish this. Chulan moved first, yet to press his advantage while his exhausted opponent was still slumped against the rocks, drawing arrowheads and other small blades and metal bits from a shield bag. He sprinted to scatter them around the beast before it could recover enough energy. It seemed the king also hoped to end this quickly. Even as Chulan tossed the metal, it took the chance to impulsively unleash a fierce lightning attack, a fatal mistake on its part. Got you! Countless blades struck into the ground and flying through the air absorbed the electrical strike and exploded, throwing up a curtain of smoke intermingling with sparks and flashes. Chulan sprang through it all, drawing that much closer to Raichu. The beast convulsed, the sparks scorched its fur, and the charged energy continually shocked its body. Never been pushed this far, have you? Taunted Junlan. Well, sorry, but I'm not done. Junlan saw the surprise in Raichu's eyes, for even a beast as powerful as it would falter upon the side of a human covered in smoke, appearing and thrusting a rival in its open mouth. The metal figure's skinless from this distance. The rival spat fire into the bear's mouth, and fresh blood, redder than even that of the flames from the shot, spurted from its mouth, staining Junlan's pale skin and the bear's dark fur. Still, perhaps due to the natural design, to struggle on its true breath. Junlan noticed its eyes still moved to focus on him and even its arm being raised. No! Junlan drew back his rival to escape, with his jaw now free, Raichu retaliated with wild, unbelievable speed, sinking its teeth into his shoulder. How long had it been since the beast had managed this? It was the first thought to flash through Junlan's mind as intense waves of pain sunk further into him. It was the only thing that could mildly stay the waves of pain that now persisted. With contact made and his senses keen from this terrible sensation, he could almost hear the bear's throat as if growled audibly. You will not escape me. You're the one who won't escape me. Its jaw was soaked in blood as it continued to ignore the bullet burning inside its body. Chulan made no attempt to tear himself away. On the contrary, shifting only as much as possible while locked in his jaw to get a better grip, he kept plunging his nagasa into its neck again and again with his free hand, electricity crackling through the length of the blade. Both crashed to the ground, their thirst for blood of the others burning in the air. Its teeth continued to bite, and his blade continued to stab until neither could no longer. After a few moments of pure silence, Pizzifliege, Geh mal auf den Sack. It was Julian. Oh, ich hab sie. Gott. Das sind ganz kleine Mistblicke, die mir die ganze Zeit ins Gesicht geflogen hat. It was Julian who rose his coat and skin, soaked in so much mud and red that could have been more his or his son's. He swayed as he attempted to steady his feet. He could hardly see through the blood draining from his forehead. The shoulder that has been endlessly punctured drooped, barely unable to move. But he was alive, and the battle was not yet over. Jonah took up his rifle again as the embers of life, though faint, continued in the eyes of the King of Thunder. It glared at the one who dealt its mortal blow, working despairingly to lift its limbs as its heart still beat. Blood burbling through its mouth and wounds with every sharp breath. So long as it lived, it would never stop trying to stand. With an eerie stillness about a moment, Jonah slid around into his weapon before placing it between the beast's eyes. A final gunshot then railed through the mountain, carrying with it the end of a legacy's life. Chapter 12. Through the Newton Journey. The day had come when one of the long-time threats disturbing the order of the mountain-wide ground was no more. Raichu, the false monarch none wished for, was finally felled by none other than a young man with whom it shared a cursed history. "You did it, Junan," piped Thou. "Nice work," followed Zayu. "That's our first objective cleared." The companions who helped him achieve this event, what it meant to him, raised their voices in congratulations as they approached. Junan listened, confirming the beast was indeed dead before collapsing and leaning back against his chest to catch his breath. A chill running through him as the tension of a life or death struggle released itself all at once. His breathing was heavy, but it was dead. It really was dead. As he looked up to the sky, the cloud once conjured to divine and endless source of thunder glared, revealing the sun at last. "Yeah," Junan croaked. "I feel like I can finally move on now, even if it wasn't just my win. Without you, I'd have never been it." Though this battle was a deeply personal one to help him overcome his past, he could never pretend to believe the result would have been the same had he come along. It was not a fight with Julian, but Julian and the Woodland Wanderers. It was a distinct, valuable level of camaraderie he had not felt in a long, long time. Then when he scratched each other's backs, Sammy responded, "Because without you, we had never been able to get that last shard of the artifact." "Oh yeah, wait a second, I'll get it for you." Julian's body was heavy, but he lifted himself and turned toward the body, Nagasa in hand. He cut into the beast, forcing some thrust into his movements beside his discomfort from his wounds accompanying it. The head was thick and tough to puncture. "Need some help there?" "No, I can't handle it though. You keep on the lookout for our next fight." He wanted to do this for them, just as they had helped him take down Raichu, completing a goal that had gone neglected for years. He wanted their strength to contribute to a completion of their goal. As he watched and waited with anticipation, he almost felt embarrassed getting so worked up at the thought of helping them. He was grateful the blood spattered across his face, hit his flushed cheeks. Thou continued on as Shunan worked. "Well, that's checking one big thing off your list. You finally got revenge for your old man." "I think I would call revenge. I don't think my dad would have wanted me to treat it as something so simple either. Sounds like something Saya would say, but if it wasn't revenge, then what was it?" "Oh, true. I could say my next journey will be figuring that out, I guess." John felt himself taking one more step toward understanding what his father said as he pulled a piece of metal out of the corpse. But let's put it aside for our journey now. The metal, which had been lodged in Raichu's stomach and had caused unnatural organs to bloom around it, turned out to be the blade of a knife. John felt it was heavier than his own Nagasa, however, and its length and width reminded him of the Vestgaladius. "So this was the part that transformed the normal bear into the King of Thunder, right?" he asked. "That's right," answered Zayu. "It was one of these crows in the shrine we were at before. There's no doubt about it, this is the last of the Thunderflash blade." "So it really is part of the sword then?" After wiping the blade clean of Raichu's innards, he then handed it to Zayu, and she slotted it into the cylinder of the frozen skull. The two pieces indeed fit as though they were made for one another, further confirming his suspicion. For the cylinder was some kind of fluid at first, but it was a hilt all along. That's right, it's the artifact we've been searching for, the blade of the thundering skies. As the two pieces became one, the blade emitted a dazzling flash of light and a cloud of fog. Once it cleared, the wood Saya had in her hand was far from the rusted cylindrical trinket and blade covered in gore. It was now a clean golden weapon of esteemed power, a creature of such delicate beauty that all three of them could feel the wisdom of ages past distilled within its form. Still, we could have had control over better elements than lighting water for when we faced the Oni. Do you know much about this artifact was used for? Scroll didn't say, but at least had a basic overview of what the artifact does. And now it's back at full power, right? And does it do anything that could actually give us a leg up over him? Humans apart, 2 goals have been completed. The lightning got determined mount the white ground through Raichu and now continued in his form as the blade of the thundering sky. Yet there was no time to bask in the warmth of victories won, for they had one last foe to face before all was done. One last foe powerful enough to sap them of their building hope and shatter the bonds they had forged. Hey, interrupt guys, but it looks like we're already out of time, Thou warned. He climbs a lot faster than I thought. Yeah, I guess so, Chunanga responded. If you don't take him down, Saya spoke, and focused and ready for what was to come, this fight will never end. There was a commotion down the mountain, one that, even at a distance, they could feel was laced with the intent to kill. Soon their eyes were fixed on the Oni. The strength of the murderous rage and willpower in the gaze he returned or shattered anything the 3 of them could muster. Chapter 13. An unending fight. The danger that had long loomed over my white ground, Raichu, had been severely defeated, and the woodland wanderers retrieved the blade of the thundering skies. Yet still there was one final threat closing in on these young heroes, one devastating enough to destroy all the progress they struggled to make so far. There you are! Completed artifact and all! The Oni growled eagerly. That saves us some time. Raichu's gone, so all that's left for me is to feast on you. Oh, you climb faster than I thought, thou commented. Use one of your funny tricks again? Given the star naturally sounded, Julian agreed with the observation. No matter how strong the Oni was, it had only been a short time since he revived himself from beneath the sheet of ice. Julian looked behind the man to see that the entire terrain he passed had been extensively altered. The demon's stone grafting powers had been used to create stairs and other unnatural hitches and juts of earth to make it easier to conquer the terrain to the top. Guess you don't call yourself the stone melter for nothing. Of course, did you think mere walls and spears were all I could master? Julian flashed a wide grin that showed a numerous amount of teeth. I hope you enjoy being my prey, even you, Matagi. The defeat of Raichu has captured my attention. You'll make for a suitable morsel. Stop talking like we are slabs of meat, Julian snapped. He understood well that the Oni wanted out of them, and it was far from profound. He had used the stone melting and fought his way to the summit, not just to steal the artifact, but to feed his lust for slaughter. Though Julian had no idea what awakened his desire, he could see that all living beings, regardless of their birth, were his prey. You have no intentions of being a Moses, spat Sayu, and you have nothing to do with whatever grudge or obsession you seem to have against our people. You came here to fulfill the goal we were given, that's all. No amount of intimidation would set her on another path. At once did Sayu waver as she glared straight into the eyes of the monster who had threatened the woodland wanderers for so long. Now with the blade of the thundering skies in hand, she was filled with more than just determination. She was filled with a piercing, almost overwhelming willpower. The Oni laughed darkly at this display of bravado. You think you won because of that? How pathetic. Think it all you like, but the artifact will soon be in my master's hands. I have more than just this. I have more confidence, more knowledge, and a new friend. As you said this, Sayu leveled her crossbow with the blade of the thundering sky slotted into it. This time, I am going to beat you. In Sayu, Julian saw the strength he had lost and was slowly regaining. He grieved with all of those things, for he, too, and more confidence, knowledge, and friends to lift him up now. I'd risk their lives as a team to conquer that which seemed impossible. And though he did not come out of the battle unscathed, the bonds he gained in the name of his victory would not go unremembered. Not wanting to let his companions down, Junan drew on what was left of his exhausted energy and pointed his rival toward the Oni. It seemed to amuse the man greatly. Junan Matagi, who brought down Raichu, I will gladly feast upon you. I do hope you entertain me in place of my prey that you had the audacity to take. Better count me in too, Thou shouted. He was the first to throw himself at the Oni, leaping into the air and kicking off a nearby wall to launch himself forward. As Thou readied for an explosive mid-air spinning kick at the back of his target's neck, Junan and Zayu readied themselves to fire their weapons at any given moment. To the surprise of non-presence, Thou's foot met with a shield of rock. Banging salmon to rise won't work against me, you imbecile. It's not a hand, it's a foot, so who's the real imbecile here, huh? Tony grunted in surprise as Thou kicked off the shield with ease. In the same instant, a bolt wrapped in fog flew toward the Oni's side, only just being blocked in a split second. He shifted a makeshift shield from his right hand to his left. The bolt was not alone, it had come accompanied by a bullet fired from Junan, creating a deep crack in its stony foundation. Sorry, but I'm just a diversion again, Thou mocked. Guess the same trick can work twice against you. Must be that your brain made of rocks too. I'm a stormrider, your childish taunts mean nothing to me. Sorry, knock him on his ass, Thou cried. Another bolt punctured the shield an instant later, erupting like a bolt of lightning with a loud clap and flashes of light. The shock shattered the initial crack, and hot wind from the explosive aftermath singed the hairs on the Oni's flesh. So I seemed very pleased with these results. I'd call my first shot with this artifact a success. I might have needed time figuring this out than I thought. The attack was a perfect display of the absolute power she now wielded in her small hands. She still wrapped her balls in the fog born from the surrounding moisture in the air, but his power now acted as a conductor of sorts, giving rise to long-range, precise lightning strikes. There was also one other thing she only just noticed after the lightning subsided. Admit, you have yourself a dangerous weapon there. Quite a power that Raichu had hidden within himself. Another thing, that's all the blade of Thundering Skies has got to it, I retorted. He can control water and lightning to do what it did just now, yes, but I think its actual purpose was to... Her words were cut off as the Oni threw himself toward her. Can't be the first one to die. He formed a rock wall behind himself to hurl his great body in the direction of the two who burned him with their ranged attacks. Watch out, Zayu! Junan tried to block the incoming stone spear flung at him, but the impact was enough to fragment the Nagase he had hunted with for so many years to its hilt. He believed you could block me with the pathetic knife? Fool. There's still plenty of ways to stop you with it. Junan dived to catch one of the shards from his beloved blade before throwing it at the Oni's face. It may have been damaged, but its steady edge still remained, slicing along his target's eye on contact. Impudent brat, the enraged man roared from pain. Trade up to superior craftsmanship. Alright, he's open. Junan and Zayu jumped to give themselves some space from the Oni before opening fire on him for another round. At the same time, Thou lashed out with a fresh kick from behind, followed by what was to be a vigorous punch to the tattooed back. If the Oni hadn't stopped at first. No, Thou! Screamed Zayu. Stone spear sliced open Thou's side, one especially jagged from being formed in the Oni's haste to defend himself. The nimble Thou sunk to his knees after falling into the trap, blood dripping heavily from the wound. Though the spear's point had missed anything vital, any kind of wound that slowed one down before such a ruthless man was a fatal one. Damn it, there's gotta be a way to save Zayu at least. Thou forced a burst of his depleted strength to roll out of the way of the Oni's accompanying attack, but Junan fired shot after shot to try and pin their opponent down. Just as the young man came face to face with the impending defeat, Zayu piped up with a strange question. Hey Junan, is there a one-way tunnel or well of some kind around here? Like a really deep one? Junan was taken aback, but he also trusted there was a purpose behind it. With the Oni's full attention on Thou, the two quickly exchanged words. Yeah, on the ways down, it's a cave about 10 acre deep, but there's only one way to get in or out. So what do you have in mind? Something that's a gamble. Well, how things look right now, I've got no problem betting all my chips on you. So I smiled. Thanks, I think as long as I have a closed off space, I can unleash it. The blade of thundering skies full power. For an instant, he understood just what that power was. A drilling breeze had taught and demonstrated as much to him through a series of natural science lessons. Alright, you guys will need to head straight down to Trey to chase Raiju up. You should find a cave there before long. What about you, Jordan? Here's some time to prep bread. I know this mountain like the back of my hand. I'll keep him busy. As far as the Matagi's mind, the best way to repay his debt and show that he had full trust in the Woodland Wanderer. Chapter 14. The Rage of a Beast. There was no reason to hesitate. Having been freed from his own fate, Junan could now dedicate every last bit of his remaining strength to helping his companions. He fired off several more rounds, and Dao, either knowing Junan's intent or inspired to act through Zaya's cry, rushed to his feet and darted through an opening in the Oni's defenses. Always so quick to flee, Mouse, the Oni spat. Hey, I'm your opponent now, Junan demanded. You know, the one who stole Raiju's kill from you. The Oni turned toward the call and gunshot aimed at his back, watching Dao flee from the corner of his eye before presenting a bloodthirsty smile to his opponent. You think you can find me alone, Matagi? Damn right I can. It's my duty to protect this mountain, so you gotta get through me first. A dark laugh was elicited from the man. Always appreciate those who don't know their own limits. Come and let me have a taste of the power that took down the King of Thunder. Junior had completely fallen for Junan's provocation, but something didn't feel right about it. A shadow of doubt crossed Junan's heart as he wondered just how this man, of all men, could fall for such a simple ploy. This man kills Woodland Wanderers to make himself stronger, he thought of himself. But is he really after the artifacts? Is it just about a hunt? Junan bidding the Oni to follow. As he did, he pondered on his questions further, creating yet more questions about the strange enemy they faced. On the surface, he hunted for artifacts on behalf of some unknown clan. This later turned into an excuse to hunt the Woodland Wanderers and kill them for his own personal gain. Which was his true purpose now and then? Was it orders or lust for blood? Well, whichever one it is, I still can't let him off the hook. Junan shook the question off with a final thought on the matter. He had to defeat the Oni, purpose known or unknown, even if he felt a twinge of pity toward a human who somehow lost his sanity to war-hungry impulses. Guiding the enemy with carefully aimed shots, Junan brought him to a stretch of mountain barren of outcroppings or trees. Its flat terrain creating a thick, undisturbed blanket over the ground. Its lands made it an ideal spot for sledding, but it had been left untouched by humans. Did you afford you to lead me on a merry chase? Snared the Oni. Did you underestimate me? Because I may well have overestimated you. Sure about it? In the same instant, Junan's rifle fired as he whirled around to avoid the Oni's fist striking the ground. The bullet that flew through the air was reduced to a harmless spark by a rock wall. It would have been had all gone to plan. Possible? My wall? Why? The wall found by the Oni was too low to cover his body, and the bullet instead grazed off the very top of the wall and pierced the target's shoulder. Why did it stop? What did you do? Nothing. Take a look around. The current battlefield was a sea of snow, a place where the rocks so desperately needed for the Oni's defenses were buried deep enough to be difficult to retrieve on the fly. The man's face twisted with enough disgust at the revelation that it seemed to change the script of the arcane writing tattooed over him. I'm going to ask you again, what are you? Despite revealing just how he bested him in the current environment, Junan felt he was in no position to take further advantage of it. You're hungry for more power when you don't have a full grasp of the power you already have, so you murder Woodland Wanderers. I know you're not all there, but even then, I'm having a hard time understanding you. The more he spoke, the more his anger fell to pity. He knew the emptiness of having lost one's purpose in life as much as he knew the joy of finding value and purpose again. This man's purpose, simple in declaration yet far more complex than claimed, had at some point become distorted. Somewhere along the way, your reasons for fighting and your reasons for living somehow got jumbled together. Realizing this, Junan felt if he brought it further, he might just see into the man's heart. He noticed the color drain from the Oni's skin, a kind of apprehension that came when oneself was being exposed. You said your power was gifted to you, right? Did it inspire you or give you purpose? Maybe I just told what your purpose was. Shut up! All the Oni seduced began to flash a reddish-black glow while giving off a heat strong enough to burn his very flesh. Julian had never seen anything like it. He felt dwarfed in the shadow of his sinister glow before him. Bullseye, huh? Don't you charm me? What could you possibly understand about me? The Oni spat. I should have died when they took my home, but I'm here, so who would condemn me for wanting power, for wanting to feed his hunger? Wouldn't Wanderers took you home? That doesn't sound like them at all. Or was that something someone told you too? Try no interest in his opponent's life story, so awful as it appeared to be. The Oni, his driving forces being laid bare, in turn spoke in low but powerful snare, let the madness of his movements grow more frantic. Kill, hunt. I love to devour the woodland wanderers, but you should understand this hunger, fellow hunter, why I would want to make a meal out of you. This isn't some hunt I could never accept. What you're doing is hunting. They fought on, evenly matched in offense and defense, despite having been robbed of his advantage and reason. The Oni showed no signs of slowing his frenzy. He could not throw makeshift spears in an instant, so he raised what he could of a shield as he rushed of the Tagi. Julian fell back step by step, all the while firing at the wall bearing two other. Julian was struck by the hollowness of the Oni's existence as they continued. It appeared his hunger was only a terrible greed that would never be satisfied. We are targeted to live, to accomplish our goals, to face life. Don't dump our traditions with your meaningless slaughtering. Now what have I been fighting for? Are you saying I really killed for nothing, Matagi? Joe knew he could never lose against such a man. How could someone fighting to discover his own goals, someone fighting to protect others, someone now fighting to handle all his people, and to give ever lose against one who destroyed to fill an impossible void? Leaning his weight on the rock wall built up, the Oni rushed headlong down the slope. It was though he wanted to use all of his destructive self and all the pressure building within to crush Julian whole. How should I know if you don't know? But what I do know is you not knowing the answer will spare your loss on this mountain. Julian felt none of this pressure, however, for it all rang as hollow as the Oni self in his eyes. He was full from reason for being enforced once, and he could draw from those strengths Hurry needed to conquer his foe. The Oni lashed out with a hard, heavy stone pole, but the attack did nothing but send the air in snow dancing. I missed? Where are you? Right in front of your face. Julian was gliding over the snow on a wooden plank, a piece of a cabin that once stood on the remote slope. In his rage, the Oni cared not for his own side. It was blocked by his rock wall and had continued charging forward wildly, completely missing that Julian was preparing his getaway. No matter, shouted the Oni. The snow around here is more shallow and the advantage is mine again. Indeed. Seeing crowds starting to poke through the snow in pockets gave the Oni the confidence to boast. If he could take down this brat who managed to see through the bravado that sustained him, then all would be well again. Little did you know, Julian had a good reason for leading the Oni to an area where his advantage would be lost. Okay. As he came inside of the cave, Julian, ready to place his faith in the next step from his companions, threw aside the board and pushed the last of his energy into his legs. What? Julian immediately felt something was off in the blaze that should have brought him hope. White haze? Is she not ready yet? He did not expect the cave to be obscured by white fog. He turned back to his foe, and perhaps noticing Julian's confusion, or simply basking in favorable terrain, Julian shivered with delight. His tattoos began to pulse with light, shining so brilliantly, even the gleam in his eyes was lost from view. Oder ich kann die Farbe von dem Buch ändern. Und vom Notebook. Chapter 15. The Storm Mother Grumples. Sorry, I see Junam with the Oni. Looks like this is it. This would be the place where the Wooden Wanderers and Matagi would end their fight against the man who terrorized them. Keep watch outside the dead-end cave they hold up in. They'll see their companion and spawn enemy approaching at a rapid pace. It was difficult for him to report Asayu. Though he stopped bleeding, the wound in his side was painful enough to render him immobile. Still, Dao felt such pain was nothing compared to the opportunity to finally sever the chains of torment and nightmares this man had inflicted upon his people. Sorry, Dao, I don't estimate how tough this will be. Sayu's response was uncharacteristically bitter. She was examining the balls she had pierced into the walls of the cave, pulling them out when unsatisfied with their placement and adding them elsewhere. As she hopped here and there through the mist while scratching the blade of the thundering skies, there was a quiet determination in her eyes, and despite the frigid rebel, a cold sweat dripped down her face from the nerves. What's wrong? I've never heard you doubt yourself like this. But if you get troubles, it's my job to share the burden with you. When Meadow stood above the cave, he couldn't see her expression, nor did he know exactly what she was attempting to do from the inside. Yet he knew her voice well, as much as he believed unwaveringly that against all her anxiety, whatever the problem, they would come as a team. It's a hard effect. It's taking longer than I thought to figure out, responded Zayu. I think being half inside right, you changed it somehow. Like it's been augmented to better suit its lightning attacks. Barely understand a word of that, but if you're struggling with it, it's not a complete loss, is it? Like, the estimation on what it does isn't that far off? It's not. So long as I have enough time, I should be able to make this work. Zoe pushed herself to move faster as she used the balls and the artifact to adjust the amount of mist and electricity in the cave. She could not afford to slow her hands. Slick with condensation they now were, as even just a hair more impatience would risk harming her accuracy. I'll go meet with Junlan to buy some more time, then, Dao said. Then we jammed Oni into this hole as soon as you're good to go. Even on the top of the cave, he waved and ready to take off toward Junlan, who was already within enough range to hear him call out. Dao, not with that wound, Sayo cried. Breathing stopped so I can handle another fight. I do whatever it takes to help you fulfill your goals, Sayu. It's what I live for. Dao made a playful slapping of his biceps. I was aware of how much control one required of the muscles to master Shin, but she knew he was only trying to reassure her. The only reason he could still run now was due to him flexing his core to reduce bleeding and prevent the wound from widening. They had no time to dress it with herbs or bandages. But I have Junlan with me. Your plan will work, so no more doubting, and just do what you gotta do to see this through. Junlan and the others had noticed Dao by this point, causing him to accelerate the burn on his body to enter the fray sooner. No matter how Sai protested, he was going to fight. Darn Dao, I wish your body could keep up with all the grab you put it through. He was right, of course. Though she grumbled with worry and irritation, she had to trust her own thinking and focus on her end of the plan. Her cousin had always been there to protect her. She knew, well, she could leave her safety to him. I'm sure you're okay to move around, Junlan shouted to Dao, alarm apparent in his voice. Right back at you, but whether we're good or not, we gotta keep throwing down. Junlan understood that to mean Cyrus still needed more time. That and Dao's arrival was proof enough. After glancing over to the fog-filled cave, the Matagi knew what he needed to do. A little mouse, he said flatly, eyes now devoid of any emotion. Good, I'll kill it too. I'll crush everything. Everything. His tooth reflected his bloodlust and rage through a reddish-black shade as they pulsed from his skin. Well, we're looking extra demonic, Dao gripped. About time you start embracing the name we gave you. He's completely lost it, Junlan said. There's no telling what's going to do, so watch yourself. Doesn't it just mean you fall for traps even easier? Sure hope so. As he only formed a massive stone blade over his arm, never could tell if the roar elicited came from his voice or if the burst of color from his tattoos produced an audible shudder from the very air. The blade was a third of his arm and perforated the skin, its jagged uneven surface seeming to shriek with the wind upon every wild swing. An instant after the two young men threw themselves to the side to avoid being struck, a large tree behind them seemed to explode as though it were hit by lightning. Dao couldn't believe his eyes. What is this? Has he been hiding this kind of power the whole time? Reverie didn't use it because of the strain it puts on his body, but I don't think we can afford to just sit here and wait for him to self-destruct. The Oni was being driven by bloodlust, and only bloodlust by this point. Though the light had faded from his eyes, his body was being pushed to new, limitless heights by the madness burning within. Julian could feel it was a kind of rage that would not stop until everything around him and beyond was reduced to ash. Even if we could, I don't have the kind of patience. Let's just beat the hell out of him, Julian. Right here, right now. Way ahead of you. As if to signal the start of the official battle, Julian fired off a shot at the flesh where the Oni's right hand met into the weapon. A useless act, as it had been blocked by a stone wall now formed around his left hand. Guess we still have to deal with those damn shields. Still on point with the most annoying things, even when we just lost his marvels. Well, if we can't sneak in with little hits, we would just have to use his big swings against him. On it! It appeared the stone merging into his flesh was beginning to restrict the Oni's breathing, but through blood-soaked swings he continued to fight with his blade. Get down! His next strike was horizontal, both felt their hair being tugged by the chaotic wind as the edge passed over their heads. Thou then took his moment as a chance to counter. Stomach's wide open, time for payback. No, down, not yet. Dao persisted before Julian's shout could stop him. He transformed all his pain into anger, unleashing it all into a single attack at his foe's exposed torso. And another! The first blow was immediately followed by a roundhouse kick at the Oni's leg. However, one sent flying this time was not the demon, but Dao. Even throwing all his weight into the sweep, the Oni still had more than enough power to launch small but tremendous counterattacks with his left hand. Come on! Dao sputtered between coughs after landing. You're telling me he's just as fast on his feet even when he's out of control? You can still block bullets, of course he can counter a kick, Jonas spat with exasperation. When I said use his big swings against him, I mean we should control where he goes. Look. The ground at the Oni's feet appeared as though a deep footprint shape had been dug out of it. He was swinging massive amounts of rock, much heavier than himself, with unfathomable, unimaginable power, and with each swing, he was naturally spun around by its momentum. The enemy followed with a third attack. Julian jumped into the opposite direction of Tao and toward the cave where Sayo was waiting. The fog was getting progressively thinner. You've brought a good amount of time so far, it can't be much longer. That's right. Doesn't matter how we get him there, this ends the same way. Tao bounded before the Oni to feign a foolish frontal attack. Good for you to line up for the slaughter, howled the Oni as he reached his blade downward, cutting nothing as Dao dropped the feint and jumped nimbly away. Can't believe he had fallen for something so obvious. Hey the guts, but I might start feeling bad if this keeps up. Don't get cocky, if you eat one of those, you're done, so no messing around. Transpawning was followed by several shots to see the Oni's movements. Tony aimed a counter towards Junlam, but he had calculated the time between attacks and dodged with ease. The Matagi and Woodland Wanderer continued their pattern of baiting, attacking, and dodging, counters, baiting, attacking, and dodging, counters again, with each heavy swing bringing the target closer to the cave. They repeated it until they heard a clear bass sound that signaled to them that Sayo had exited the cave and that the end of the battle was near. That's the count. Sayo is ready. Jonathan noticed that the fog had completely cleared from the cave. Come on, Stone Melter, into your grave you go. Standing prominently with arms spread at the mouth of the cave, he taunted one last attack out of the demon. Instead of swinging again, the Oni let the blade grumble and leap for his prey, using the rock shield on his left arm instead. One last push, huh? Jonathan muttered under his breath. Yet he did not flinch in the face of his direct assault. In a moment, words from Sayo threw the vagabond's flash across his mind. And the unexpected, with the unexpected. So Jonathan did just that. With encountered the Oni's barreling strike, Jonathan stood still, took a deep breath, and rolled backwards into the cave. Dao! Got it! Dao dove in behind them, and after grabbing Jonathan's arm as he laid entangled in the Oni's crib on the ground, unleashing Shin. See ya, walk for brains! It's the end of the line for you! Tony doubled over and fell, releasing his grip just as Dao used the momentum of the attack to pull himself and Jonathan safely back out of the cave. The rampage ends here! Still sailing through the air with Dao, Jonathan aimed one last shot into the cave and fired. It seemed to course through the air with the will of the man who fired it, flying underneath in the cave toward the Oni's head, a brisk whistle following its path. Then raised his stone shield to block it. And right then, sparks engulfed in a flash of light as bright as the sun. The lone shot had become a fireball that consumed all that dwelled within the cave, taking the Oni along with it. Chapter 16. Clinging to what is precious. Another cursed fate had been severed. After the flames erupted and explosions continued unceasingly, the brittle rocks of the cave collapsed, further sealing the demon within. Yow! Dao reacted with surprise, coupled with pain, as his back was slammed against the snowy ground. Looking up at the cave, he was met with even greater surprise. He knew the plan would be enough to bring down the inside of the cave, but his outer shell was crumbled as well, carving a new base into the landscape. With balance lost, the loose and natural broken stones started sliding away, taking much of the slope with it. Was it meant to do all that? This full-on cave-in must have been the only, Juno replied. He couldn't block an explosion from every direction with his powers, but he probably messed with as many of the rocks inside as he could before his death. So instead of putting out rocks from his surroundings to make shears, just made things worse from his time. Makes sense, but no way did he cause that huge an explosion. Was that the blade of the thundering skies? I don't know, but I'm sure she could tell you. At some point I had been rejoined by Zayu, who stood by to observe for just inspired. Like her companions, there was no hint of surprise in her face. There was a hydrogen explosion. The logic is simple. The true purpose behind the artifact is to collect and deconstruct water molecules, but just gathered up in the cave and Jun ignited. Zayu! Dao cried with joy. You're alright. I heard it all. I have no idea what you just said, but as long as you're okay, I'm okay. I'm one ear and the other. What about you, Dao? Are you okay? Even after using Shin again? Dao reacted with a grimace as though the question reminded him he was indeed severely injured. All around him, the snow was dyed a deep red. Dao! Damn, I guess they won't open him up. He grunted. Can't believe I screwed up this bad. It's okay, I think. Your wounds only opened up a little bit, but it doesn't mean you're good to move around just yet. Lay back for me. Yeah, sorry. But thanks, Zayu. Yeah, but thanks. Zayu procured some herbs and bandages from a pouch. Shouldn't wanted that, but as he tried to sit up, he was overcome with a wave of exhaustions and numbness in his legs and fell right back down. Not you too, Junlan. I'm fine, reassured Zayu. I think all the adrenaline from fighting is just finally catching up to me. I'm nowhere near as bad off as Dao. After inspecting Julian's wounds, Zayu seemed to believe he was telling the truth, and she quickly returned to patching up Dao. Still, her worries were getting the better of her, and she would glance in his direction now and again between her work. I really am fine, just let me rest for a bit, he said. Voice weak with an overwhelming drowsiness. If you don't have any medicines to perk me up, then I'll just sleep for a bit. It's not like I'll die or... Julian dragged off. As the vision dimmed, he could have sworn he could see two people reagonize behind Zayu as the sunlight peeked from over his shoulder. The snow beneath him, cold as it was meant to be, felt more akin to a warm bed as he drifted off to sleep. A few hours later, Juno was awake and leaning with Zayu in the shade of a tree as he watched the sun continue to rise. With everyone looking at one another as they spoke, gazing into the same sky in peace gave them a deeper sense of connection than doing so ever would. I wish I could have learned what the only steel was, Zayu mused. Still have a whole lot of questions. And I wish I could tell you, Jim responded. But I will say that toward the end, I did feel kind of sorry for him. It felt like something was pushing to a point where there was no turning back even if he wanted. And so too? I suppose it's all the moot point now. We attacked and, well, we defended ourselves. That was all. Dao slept soundly near a pile of straw the two managed to put together. According to Zayu, the worst was over and he would recover. At the same time, they both looked over the collapsed cave along the slope. There was no sign of movement. Mount Whitegron had its natural silence, returns to it at last. I think I finally get why you can walk your path without hesitation, Junan said. Do you? In a way that will help you along your own path? Yeah, I think it will. Junan had dreamed briefly that he was reunited with his father. They exchanged no words, but the dream was a simple one, unclouded by indiscernible emotions. His father told him he was proud of him. that he could now move on to find his next goal in life. And after ruffling his son's hair, much as he did so often while still living, he disappeared. It was enough to remind Junlan why he was always so bound by everything his father told him. I've always wanted my life to have meaning, Junlan continued. I wanted meaning to feel like a Matagi, meaning to know I really was facing life, as my dad had put it. And not knowing how to find it left me in a standstill. But after meeting you and just giving everything into seeing your goal completed, I think I better get what he meant. Meaning isn't something to search for or justify in the moment. It's something you find when you look back on what's been done. You can think back on the life I faced and see what it meant to me. Then I've already fulfilled our beliefs as Matagi. To weaved into another's path, he found something new and wonderful about himself that he would never have found otherwise. I guess that makes us opposites. Sarah let out a small juggle, followed by the brightest, widest smile Julian had seen from her yet. Having lowered his gaze from her environment surrounding them to meet hers, Julian was left to wonder how such an unrefined smile could feel so serene at the same time. So clear were her eyes, and that he could even see himself in them. A face with a similarly brilliant, warm expression that he almost could not recognize. Feeling suddenly sheepish from watching her for too long, he turned away. Opposites. And for me, I feel like meaning comes first. If I do anything, I make sure there's meaning behind the decisions I'm making. Now, then we really are just as opposite as you can get. Since I had faith that every action would be worth something, she never had to look back and wonder if what she had done was worthwhile. Sure, however, thought it better to look back at what was done and clean a new, more solid foundation from the path already forged. I'll always be stuck in the past, I guess, he whispered. I think that's true, so I pointed his intention to the blade of the thundering skies. I think you're a little more like me than you think. We never could have won this fight without you. In fact, I would say we won our battles because you trusted that your help would turn the tides in our favor. And maybe I'm a little more like you than I think too. Our paths and goals just happened to cross, so I continued. But here we are now, looking back and having gotten something out of this coincidental experience. Meaning. Both sides brought something of themselves to the day, working to cover for each other's weaknesses in order to overcome a series of great trials as a team. Despite their short time together, they knew that what they managed to achieve was no small accomplishment. So it sounds to me like you were able to find what you were looking for. Kind of. Joran did have an answer, but he felt it was one among many possible answers to be discovered. If for now at least, it was enough to give him the direction to start walking. Not sure if I were able to stick to the path I found the way you guys have. Think you'll be fine. You remind me of the Watagi who showed me mine, and also of how I was when I first met him. Joran still did not know who that vagabond was, who showed Zayu her way all those years ago, but he was grateful for the great change he brought in her. In that sense, Joran could very much see how he was like the lost little girl the Watagi had guided. I wonder what he's looking for in his travels, Joran pondered, and where he was going. Thought about the last 2 days some more, and he was left with the sense that he had closed the journey he never thought to drag. He met new people he could trust, unbound himself from a broken past, and found courage that would see him to a mended future in such an unimaginable short amount of time. And he was so very proud of it all. What a sweet feeling it was to realize his life was worth living. This might be a big gamble on my part, but maybe it'd be a good idea to take up new trails. Continue searching for an even bigger path to walk, like you guys. And so Junlan decided he would take his first steps toward the future. There was no firm road to guide him, but he trusted with more certainty that the beaten path walked would look incredible when he turned back around to admire it. Chapter 17, the finale, Mataki. A month passed. March heralded the beginning of spring. For most, this would mean flowers and sunshine. For Mount Whiteground, however, snow was still falling and falling, piling into heavy blankets along the ground. Those who lived on the mountain knew her mannerism smell, and they felt in their bones that this particular spring had come on much quicker and was far milder than in previous years. Still, there were fewer blizzards to chase travelers off its winding trails, and green bamboo shoots could be seen poking their heads out of thinner patches of white. The elderly residents of the Matagi's village remarked that this was the true spring of mountain dry ground they remembered from their youth. John thrust a sturdy stake through the back of his belongings, then stepped out of the door of his home. He walked down a path leading to the village, thinking along the way of how that path, as small as it was, came with so many meaningful discoveries. Last year he had been full of such little things, and if he could find them through a hunting path like this one, then he was certain to discover an unfathomable wealth on the new, far-long trail ahead of him. Leaving on schedule, you are punctual at children. The children passed through the village before the sun had even risen. As though he were waiting for him, he heard the voice of the chief calling out to his back. John had intentionally gotten his horals out of the way the night before so he could leave in the morning when everyone was still in bed. Should still be asleep. The goodbyes were what yesterday was for, Chief. Think an old man like me can't rise and shine this early in the morning, the chief harumphed. I spent many a long, adventurous night out camping for wild game, you know. I can get up early for something this important. I know this isn't quite what you were hoping for, but I think I will be a better man for it. So thank you for that, really. John was long overdue to say this to the man, for it had been too long since he expressed his gratitude, and the times he expressed it were too few on the whole. Even as he said it, he was relieved it was still too dark for the flushed expression on his face to be visible. He always felt that the elders saw him as a burden. He was the last of his generation in this village, a pedigree youth trained by his father, the previous chief, who had himself been trained by a Matagi of legend. What a waste of potential he was for his lack of confidence or direction in life. Surely they begrudged him being their final option as the next to carry on the will and would be glad to see him gone. But when he announced his desire to leave, all of them, led by the chief, worked the hardest to convince him to do otherwise out of the genuine want for his presence. It was until he explained his motives that they agreed the journey would be an excellent character building exercise for their future chief and welcomed the idea with warmth. It's often said that children are unaware of just how precious they are to their parents, and Julian now imagined this to be the case with him in the village. Hoped for? You found your bride as a Matagi, that's more than what I could have hoped for. Your father, Master Kiyun, would also be very proud. I'd like to think that. Thank you, Chief. I promise I'll find a way of giving back to this place after everything it's given me. John felt the village needed to be to bet on the winds of change. He was nowhere near ready to lead as the next chief, but if he could continue cultivating meaning in life, wherever that high station, he was confident he could be a part of ushering in a new age for his people. Last month I was able to put something behind me after years of stagnation, he told the chief. I acted as a Matagi to save others and upheld our ways to eliminate what which threatened it. I want to find more of what changed me and then in the rest of the world. Oh, you were less stagnant than you realize. You haven't changed all that much in my eyes even. You think so? Drew was caught off guard by this. He was certain he would be told how much he had changed in such a short time. To him, his horizons had expanded far beyond anything he had ever known before, transforming into someone unrecognizable from the man he was. You've never been able to ignore someone in need. All you did last month was just that. I'd say it was perfectly in line with how you've always been. It was true. It was his very instinctive habit that had been the catalyst for him to meet a young girl and start his whole adventure. If there was, in fact, a connection between his impulses to help others and his constant struggle to find meaning in this mere existence, then perhaps he really had changed very little. What was I got to say? The chief began. I noticed a lighter shift in his voice, now present to account for Junan's downcast gaze. The preserving of Raja's body is almost finished. Are you sure you don't want it? It was you and your father's goal for so long. You have every right to claim it. Or that. True to tradition, once it was confirmed that the Oni was no longer a threat, then Matagi had retrieved the corpse of Raichu and stuffed it. It was a method of displaying that the danger had passed and the mountain had continued being protected, from impurities by human hands. It was also a great symbol of pride, as the Matagi were always quick and sure to assign the glory of an archer's kill. She was alright to leave it in the village square. It's fine, there's no space for it in my house, and besides, I needed to cut ties with it in my past. The rest of us will be sure to take good care of it. It will make for a wonderful reminder of how you protected us for generations to come. Junan gave a small nod of approval. If his old regret could be transformed in such a way, then he welcomed it. Well then, I'm off. Now with no such heaviness to weigh him down, his greatest worry was how much meaning he could absorb in the great wide world to make his own. Would he find anything at all? Would he meet his newfound companions who changed so much of him again? Would he see how much he had grown after what he would come to learn? Casting these bubbling thoughts of anxiety aside, Junan turned away and departed. Even if many an obstacle or trial arose from his new path, he knew he possessed the means to overcome them. After all, he was a Matagi. He could face whatever life had to thrown at him. You take care, Junan. We'll be waiting for your return. The chief said to himself, standing and watching till he could see the young man's back no more. Once he was out of view, he turned his gaze to the relic beside him of Kion Olkis, pulled out a gourd of sake from his robe, and sprinkled some of it over the monument before resting his back against it. I don't know if you remember his face, Kion, but the son of your disciple just left saying the same things you did. The smile on his face was different from the one of support he had shown Chunlam. It was not a youthful grin, but closer to a nostalgic grin often worn in his youth as he thought back to his younger years. He said this whole continent was one big mountain, that we were merely at one of its summits, and to discover what truly was to be faced in life, we needed to discover all it had to give us. I don't claim to understand such grand ideas, but then, call me a simple man. Plenty content watching over our little home as it is right now. The relic sparkled as it bathed in the light of the morning. So it took down Raiju and even a demon. The way he is now, I think he more than understand what you meant by the end of the journey. Junan had seen of Sayu and Dao 2 days after Dioni's defeat. As soon as their wounds were healed, they felt the duty to rejoin their people, let them know the threat that long plagued them was no more, and make their way to the shrine. He found it strange just how much he learned about them when he reflected back on the brief 2-day period of recovery. There they had been, forced to uncover one another's competitive strengths and weaknesses out of necessity, placing a deep trust in one another that would ordinarily take years to develop, and then there they were. The storm that brought them together having passed, it was upon this respite that both sides realized they hardly knew who the other was at all. They then gathered around the table as friends, teaching each other their ways in detail. From the river, Junan learned much about the woodland wanderers beyond what he saw in the book, and Sayu and Dao listened with crippling interest about the many traditions of the Matagi around them. These conversations sparked his desire to depart. There had been a reason Sayu walked her path, something behind the unshakable faith that her every action along the path held meaning. And it stemmed from that vagabond Matagi and the book he gave her. Fruits, lengthy content, Sayu grew increasingly curious about how her people fit into the puzzle around them, wondering if she could unveil new meaning to their ways by discovering a more personal purpose through them. Junan hoped for much the same. If he could discover more about himself through the new path he was choosing to walk, would he, too, be able to return home a more complete person and put his experience to use. The goals were not to do away with old traditions, but to find new ways to celebrate them by creating better selves. The two swore they would meet one another again, not just as friends, but as sides that would continue to inspire one another to new heights. Junan dearly hoped that by the time their paths crossed, he would be the kind of person who could expand Sayu's world that much more, bring yet another dimension to her ever-growing journey. The world was a very big place. From the brief interaction, even the small world Junan had always known, the snowy mountain slopes and its many winding trails were seen in a newer light. If he couldn't learn so much from what he thought familiar, what else could he gain from running wild and taking in the great unknown? So I told him that the vagabond saw the world as one big one, and If Julian saw it the same way, then he was merely off to explore these mountains' many slopes on the hunt for prey not yet seen. Despite its grander scale, this journey and its actions were, in essence, still so very alike in Matagi's. See you when I see you, Julian thought to himself of the woodland wanderer, eagerly awaiting the day he could be the second Matagi in their life to unequivocally shift their life's course for the better. No Matagi could sleep, the roaring of beasts in the night. Julian Eisen, now officially a vagabond, had been wavering on the borders of dreams, regarding the day of his departure one moment. In the next, he was on his feet in the bed of a mini pickup truck. His trusted Reverie, his old-fashioned muzzleloader, lay firmly in his hands. Every surrounding truck that made up a caravan had skidded to a similar halt, their cargo bed passengers being jerked awake from bumpers being smacked in minor collisions from the unexpected stop. Julian scanned the surrounding area for any irregularities, picking up on this source quickly, a slough of unidentified bears surrounding the truck, leading the caravan. With incredible haste, he then leapt from the bed of the truck and rushed forward to assist him. He could have sat in silence and waited for the danger to pass while admiring the tiny peak of Mount Whiteground still visible in the far distance. But it simply was not who he was. His instinctive habit of diving headfirst into helping others persisted even beyond the home he left behind. When something he thought of as patronizing or unnecessary, he now fully celebrated it for the experience it could give him in retrospect. His journey had only just begun. To where on this mountain Julian would go, he did not know. But you could say for sure certain was that by the time he reunited with his heroic friends somewhere along its meandering slopes, he would be a prouder self for it. The end. Und damit sind wir endlich komplett durch, was Trails into Reverie angeht. Es hat auch jetzt einiges länger gedauert als gedacht. Vor allem hier nochmal den für mich dritten Playthrough noch gemacht haben. Und ich werde auch jetzt noch beim vierten Playthrough für mich persönlich machen, um wirklich die Achievements abzuschließen. Aber ja. Es ist sehr viel passiert. Wir haben aber jetzt auch sehr viel abgeschlossen. Also viele Blood Threads sind jetzt auch einfach wirklich done. Und wir können uns endlich darauf freuen, einen neuen Story Arc zu bestreiten, den wir entweder in meiner Zeit morgen im Stream starten werden oder dann für euch, wenn ihr es als Folge guckt, morgen. Geht's los mit Trails through Daybreak. Finally. Vor allem auch für mich finally, weil ich hätte theoretisch schon vor 2 Jahren Trails through Daybreak anfangen können. Aber dadurch, dass ich jetzt nochmal alles durchgespielt habe, plus Nayuda, hat sich das ein bisschen gezogen. Aber finally. Trails through Daybreak. Here I come. Und ich hoffe, ihr begleitet mich weiterhin. Ich hoffe, es wird euch gefallen. Und ansonsten wie immer, lasst gern Support da. Lasst gern Feedback da. Von allem zu dem, was bisher passiert ist. Wie es euch gefallen hat. Und eventuell, wie sehr ihr euch sogar auch auf den, Calvard freut. Ich tue es auf jeden Fall. Wir sehen uns. Bis dahin. Ciao. Und bye bye.